What's up guys, xHOUNDISHx here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about content in Destiny 2 and how we're starting to see Bungie and Activision set themselves up to deliver much more content in the new game. As always, there's some speculation when we look at this kind of thing, but there are also a lot of very real indications that Bungie is expanding the studio in a big way, and we have even more news which has surfaced in the past few days. So starting out, we know that pretty much the entirety of the main Bungie studio is working on Destiny 2, so they'll be finalizing the vanilla content for the game as expected, but we've also been continuously hearing about how Bungie and Activision are expanding the studio to deliver more content. We've already seen this start to happen. In the Dawning update, one of the new studio's Vicarious Visions produced some of the new content in the form of the armor sets that come with the event, and this is a pretty good demonstration of how this translates to more content in the game. Alongside the April update, the Dawning was certainly the most fleshed out purely live-based event that we've seen, and it was released at a time where Bungie essentially have a smaller live team than what we had last year, so this is a pretty big deal. The new studios, High Moon Studios and Vicarious Visions, seem to be working primarily on assets and post-release content for the game, while Bungie retain the creative control for the story and the game direction. The great thing to take away from this though is that High Moon and Vicarious Visions have a fair amount of experience in the field of RPG and MMO games, and particularly making content for those games. So in terms of the pedigree of what they've worked on before, this is going to be pretty fantastic for providing a constant stream of content in Destiny 2. With the studio being expanded so much, this essentially means that as a whole, Bungie can make more content going forward than they've been able to do before. With that in mind, in more recent news we've learned that Bungie is hiring again, but this time for narrative directors, and it looks like narrative is becoming an entire department, or at least a very revamped department inside of Bungie. So I first saw this from a NeoGAF post by user Niralak, which I'll link below, but essentially the studio is hiring a new live narrative director. Someone to direct the story development of the game, but purely in a live game capacity, so for things like the Dawning or Festival of the Lost. On top of this, they are hiring a narrative director for major releases, essentially doing the same job but more focused on big pieces of content like Rise of Iron or The Taken King. But this isn't just a couple of jobs though, this is an entire department which they seem to be expanding at Bungie. Another job role is for narrative director, who is going to oversee the department to manage the team and make all of the story content coherent between live and major releases. So this is a pretty big deal. There's going to be a much more dedicated team of people who work exclusively on tying together the story and direction of the game purely for additional content. Having a narrative director for live events is really interesting and exciting. It essentially looks like live events will have more story content and more context or a bigger impact on the game world than they have up until now. The Dawning and Lysander is a pretty great example of this direction, including more story and the exploration of story featuring inside of live events. We have the new character Lysander himself and his faction, which has never really been expanded on before. Lysander may also be a big part of Destiny 2, and the Dawning fortunes suggest a lot of possible story directions or events in the next game. I feel like on top of the increase in content we've seen, we're also getting a hint that live events can have far more impact on Destiny's lore. The big picture here for me though is that with the new studios on board, initially they have the workforce to produce way more assets, things like building new maps, writing mission scripts and quests, producing weapons and gear for new releases, without stretching the studio as thin as we've seen in the last year or so. On top of the fact that they'll be able to make more stuff in the game, there will also be this dedicated narrative department who work heavily on new content and tying it together. So that's a whole pretty big development team who between them coordinate the content that we'll see between big expansions, and it really looks like this is an emerging part of the Bungie studio as well, which is slowly being put into place and warmed up with the content that we're seeing right now. From looking at these job descriptions, it's clear that the model is going to remain as major releases, so actual DLC, and then live events on top. And these, in their words, will occur throughout the calendar year. If the Dawning is anything to go by, then I think we're headed in the right direction. The live team at Bungie, as well as these emerging departments, all had some kind of input on the Dawning update, and it really showed in my opinion. The Dawning wasn't perfect, but it was a vast improvement on what we've seen before, and they haven't even finished structuring these new teams and departments yet, so I think this looks really positive for the future. I've really had my doubts about the direction of the game at times, but right now I don't think I've ever actually been as optimistic about the future of Destiny. We know that there's a new game coming, and it really looks like the team is preparing to deliver heaps of content going forward. The first year of Destiny 2 is going to be a pretty incredible experience. I try not to get overly hyped about things like this, but I feel for the first time we're really seeing continuous progress in the game, and I think it could mean very good things for the remaining live game in Destiny 1, as well as what we'll see in the new game. But that's what I think anyway, guys. I'll leave the links to these articles down below so you can check them out. But what do you guys think? Do you think we're headed in the right direction, or do you feel kind of skeptical still at this point? Of course, in time, we'll find out what all of this means. But if you've enjoyed this video, a like is always appreciated down below. If you're new to the channel, consider hitting subscribe to see a lot more Destiny content. But for now, thanks for watching, and you guys have an awesome day.